Walter Becker's new album, Circus Money, that was released in the UK this week. Now, he has done 10 albums with Steely Dan, but in the last 14 years, this is only his second solo album. So whenever we spoke earlier in the week, I was asking him why it has taken so long for him to get his solo stuff out there.
You know, I think what happened is that Donald and I essentially spent most of our careers writing together, and in those last 14 years, after I finished my record, we did a couple of Steely Dan records and a couple of tours and so on, and that kept us pretty busy. And when things slowed down a little bit, I realized I was ready to do another one.
Well, as a team, you have quite a unique sound and style together, but a lot of that you obviously bring to the party, because musically and lyrically, some of it would translate into this solo album.
Well, I think Donald and I developed our artistic personae and our writing styles and so on very much together, and so there's a lot of it that's sort of common property, so to speak.
Well, you have worked with him for a very, very long time. Whenever you were a young fella, 16, 17, whenever you first met him, what kind of music was influencing you at the time?
Donald and I discovered when we met that we were both jazz fans and had much the same background. In fact, we had most of what we knew about jazz we had gotten by listening to this particular DJ in the New York area named Mort Figa. And so we had a tremendous common library, if you will, of jazz. And we were both sort of interested in the idea of making pop music that incorporated some of the elements of jazz that we love, but that was not jazz per se, and that would have lyrics and vocals and so on. And our reasoning was there was a couple of things. One was that jazz was sort of veering off in a direction that was not that likable to us, and a lot of the energy that had been going into jazz for many years was now going into pop music, and that was both on the part of the musicians and in the part of the audience. And I thought that both of us thought that pop music was more offered better possibilities for us as a framework, to write in.
Well, in all the music that you've put out, either as an individual artist, sir, or as the band, there seems to be an awful lot of space within the rhythm section. The song comes first. Obviously, that would be what you would want to happen. But, I mean, for example, in this album, you've used a lot of similar musicians that you've worked with before, like John Harrington and Roger Rosenberg, Ted Baker, and obviously drummer Keith Carlock. Is that because they create a sound that you have in your head for your ideas? You obviously trust them to work with your music.
Well, yeah, I mean, very much so, and I also know them well enough to know, the kind of dedication and deliberateness that they'll bring to a project like this. So, rather than just, I didn't really have I wasn't in a situation where I was going to put together a band and be playing this material before we recorded it. And in fact, there's something very exciting about recording songs, that you haven't been playing, where the song comes together as a particular piece of music for the very first time in the studio. And so I did some rehearsals with them to develop basic approaches to the songs.
But you're multi-instrumentalist yourself, sir, so there must be an awful temptation for you to jump into the studio whenever you write a song and routine up the tracks yourself and then give something that's almost complete or complete to those guys. Do you find there's a temptation to do that, or do you routine the tracks up with the individual players and their own instruments?
Well, it depends on it depends on the circumstances. I mean, some players are more, they want to be more prepared, and some players want to be more spontaneous. And so, in spite of, for example, in this particular case, one of the keyboard players, Ted Becker, basically I tried to get together with him a few times to rehearse, and he came to a couple rehearsals, but he basically wanted to do it on the spot. He knew he could read it. He knew that there wouldn't be any problems, and he felt better about doing it that way, and so that's the way he ended up doing it. The other keyboard player, one of the other keyboard players, Jim Beard, I hadn't met before the sessions, but I had heard him, and he was a friend of Harrington's, and I knew that he would add a lot. I felt that he would add a lot, and so he just came in at the last minute and read the things cold, and just played wonderfully.
Yeah, he's
so usually if you have a mixture of people that are hearing it for the first time, or people who are somewhat well prepared, and other people who are in a position where they can sort of float over the track or develop a new part or whatever, that works out pretty well.
Was it fun playing bass on the album? It was an interesting decision for you to do that.
Yeah, playing bass is the best for me. I love to play the bass. A lot of times you'll have an idea for a song, and in order for that thing to work, it's something that you've mocked up on a computer or whatever. In order for that thing to work, it has to change or evolve in some way. And so, being the bass player in the session gives you a tremendous amount of a tremendous ability to influence the time feel and the a change in feel or direction or whatever.
I noticed Larry Klein was co-writing most of the album with you, and he produced the song. Now he's obviously a legendary Grammy Award-winning producer in his own right, and we'll not talk about that now. But what was that experience like working with him? I know he's been a pal of yours for a while.
Yeah, he's great. We had a lot of fun writing, and he's a very very savvy and experienced record maker. He comes from basically the same background that I come from, of jazz and pop music seen through the lens of jazz, and he was very helpful. At the point where he got involved, I sort of had been thinking about this thing long enough that I had too many good ideas, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So I had sort of gone a little past the point where I might have started to put things down. And he helped me get back to that point, basically, where the ideas were a little simpler and the other possible variations of, some of the fancier schemes that I had come up with, we sort of left by the wayside. And I think a good thing, because although they were interesting ideas, they probably would have been too constraining, and the album would not have been as varied and as interesting as it is in some ways.
And did you find that whenever you were teaming up with him, it was in a similar way to the way you would work with Donald, or were Larry's contributions much more as an overview to your ideas?
Well, it was. I think it was similar to working with Donald. Larry let me sort of, seeing as how it was going to be my record, he let me sort of set the framework, the idea for the lyric ideas in the songs to a large extent, and then helped me flesh them out. And for the most part, I mean, there were some ideas that we basically created, over dinner one night or whatever, and others that, were more based on something, an idea for a song that I had had for a while, and some were based on ideas that he had had for a while, So I think he was somewhat more deferential to my ideas than Donald normally is, in the sense that it was going to be my solo record. So, he wanted it to be that.
Okay, well, I'm bound to ask, is there ever a shut-off time whenever your brain actually allows you not to think about music and you can actually get immersed into something else, or are you just totally absorbed in it all the time? Because sometimes you just wake up and it's there, you can't help thinking about it.
No, I have. I'm able to take breaks. I think it's important, perhaps more important for me than for Donald, to have some downtime in between fits of work. Partially because just the way we work together is so, and the either, as it turns out, either one of us works, whether we're working together or by ourselves, is so intense that you need breaks in there, and you need to sort of refresh your palate, listen to music and relax and so on.
And what do you listen to whenever you're relaxing?
I'm mostly still listening to music that's not so much current music. I still listen to a lot of jazz. Lately, I've been listening to some 20th century classical music that I haven't really heard much of before. There's a lot of interesting, early blues and sort of folk type things that are now, a little more in circulation than they have been in the recent years that I've been listening to.
I noticed that you've got some Steely Dan touring dates happening in the near future, and I'm sure you've probably already started shutting Walter down and turning Steely Dan back on again in your head. Is there anything particular for the die-hard fans to look forward to during that tour?
The die-hard Steely Dan fans?
Oh, yes, the die-hard Steely Dan fans.
Well, we're touring right now in the States here, and we have had this band now for a couple of years that we really like, and I'd like to just continue, to play with that band and grow it into whatever direction it seems to want to grow into. We've had a lot of fun playing the last couple of years. We were in Britain last summer and in Europe and all over the place, really. And so this year we're staying mostly in the States so far, but at some point perhaps we'll be able to get back over and do something that involves touring in UK. At some point I might do some sort of live presentation of some of these songs, some of this material.
So it's that far off then? You're not going to be sticking circus money out on tour in any way by yourself then for a while?
Well, probably not. The Steely Dan shows sort of very much the fans are often on the edges of their seats as it is to see what songs we're going to play. We have so many songs that we could play and that I think people would like to hear that we just want to give them as many Steely Dan songs as we can. So I'm going to let the album, the Circus Money album, percolate into the collective unconscious of the audience for a while.
It's funny, whenever you listen to all of your music, Walter, there's a real discipline there where it seems like there's almost an equal status between the instrument parts. The instruments are like the saxophone and guitar parts. They're little intricate lines that are coming in almost like vocal, and the balance is so meticulously presented. It's obviously something that you plan whenever you're producing your music.
Well, it's something that you develop as you go along. I don't think you plan in advance, but that's one of the advantages of working the way we do, is that you can sort of shape a lot of those things as you go along. You're not locked into a lot of decisions, and when you get a great performance by somebody on a track, a sax player or a vocalist come in and they do something really great, it changes the way you present the whole thing, Suddenly that becomes a really important voice and a really important element. And luckily we're able to now reshape what we do around that. So
well,
that's very nice of you to say.
No, not at all, sir. And thank you very much. It's a wonderful album. It really is. We're going to feature it, obviously, on the show, as we have done with all your albums over the years. And congratulations with it. Enjoy your touring and enjoy your downtime. We're going to play another track from the album now, which is Downtown Cannon. Is there any particular insight you'd like to share about that one?
It's funny. That was one of the tracks on the album that, this is a perfect example of something that Larry saved me from myself. I for some reason, I conceived of a dislike of that song, and then of the track of the song, and then of the vocal of the song. And at various points, Larry said, no, we really got to do that one. That one's good, And I'm very glad that we did, because I like the way it came out. But for some reason, I had this neurotic relationship with that particular song. So I guess maybe that means it actually does strike a chord in me that is significant.